was the only thing we've ever broadcast where like actually people wrote to us and fainted during the story because it was so intense. We didn't understand that, like, I didn't realize that was a thing that could happen.
A few months ago, I took 4 journalists, I put them in a room, gave them drinks, and started rolling tape.
Not that I'm calling bullshit on Woodward and Bernstein.
Listen, I kind of am, but in an envious manner.
Their only instructions were to show up with questions for each other and be open to talking candidly about the challenges in their jobs.
The more people vote, the more we get to Democrats. That's like a very outdated view. That's a very Obama coalition view of the world.
That's helpful.
That's really interesting.
What journalists talk about when the rest of us aren't listening.
Ooh, that is so good. That is so good.
From Placement Theory and KCRW, this is Question Everything. I'm Brian Reed.
Can we just pause and have a toast?
Yeah, cheers.
Wait, hold it. Can I just say, like, it's so sweet that this is like your first show and that we are here in this moment before the thing gets launched, and it's like a perfect little thing that like hasn't been marred and hasn't had a chance to grow, and it's just like here we are at the moment before.
Hasn't been criticized.
Hasn't been criticized, and it's just like it exists in our imaginations as a perfect future, and it's like I'm so excited for you and so glad to be here for your first show, and congratulations. Best wishes to the future.
Cheers.
It's an honor.
Fucking it up.
Or to before the fuck up. May it last long.
To purity. Welcome to purity. How did you have the audacity to choose Martin Luther King Jr. to write a biography of, and to feel like you could say something new?
Well, what I was going to say is that I feel like it's probably the same for all of us. Like anybody who's in journalism, anybody who's telling stories, right? It starts with just like a glimmer of an idea. You don't just like wake up and go, I'm going to write a biography of Martin Luther King. No, but like one day you're talking to somebody who knew Martin Luther King. And you go, that's so cool. He knew Martin Luther King.
When were you doing that? Wait, just back up.
All right.
Where were you?
Who were you talking to?
I was talking to Dick Gregory. Okay. This was like in 2015 or something like that. Okay. I was interviewing him for my Muhammad Ali book. So I'm talking to Dick Gregory, and he starts talking about Martin Luther King and about the time that Martin Luther King met Muhammad Ali. And after I left the breakfast with him, I thought, wait, that guy knew Martin Luther King. I should have asked him more about that. I kind of blew it, right?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't I just ask him a million questions about Martin Luther King? You guys hung out? And so then I began to think about it. And I began to think, there's probably a lot of people alive still who knew Martin Luther King. And maybe I should just like travel around the country and interview all the people who knew Martin Luther King. So that was my first like little...
And had you read the previous biographies at that point or anything?
Oh, I'd read some of them. Like years ago, I'd read some of Taylor Branch's trilogy. I hadn't read all of it. I read David Garrow's book. And
But once Taylor Branch has been there, how do you even think like, oh, there's something else to do? Like,
first of all, that book was kind of old already, and it was not a biography, and it was really like encyclopedic. And I thought, these guys knew Martin Luther King. They knew what it was like to hang with him. They knew what it was like to drink with him and what it was like to tell jokes with him. And that doesn't come through in the big encyclopedic book. And maybe like there's a chance to do a more intimate kind of a portrait. So that was the thought process. Like maybe there's a chance to write a single volume book that people will find entertaining, that will, and also like you think about what's happened. Like King became a national holiday in 1,000 streets, and we lost sight of his humanity, so maybe like a book that actually tells you what kind of jokes he told, and I would ask
the person. We lost track
I would
of
ask
the
these guys
person.
like, what did he smell like? You know, like I'd ask them these ridiculous questions that you guys do too. So you just have to forget for a minute that it's, oh, this is Martin Luther friggin' King, right?
Did you get pushback? Like, who's the person you really wanted to talk to? You didn't talk to the family.
The 3 kids there were only 2 alive now, but there were 3 when I started. They wouldn't talk to me. And Diane Nash wouldn't talk to me. And that was about it. Like, almost everybody else agreed to talk.
Do you know why they wouldn't talk to you?
The kids or Diane Nash? The
kids.
The kids didn't want to talk to me because the book included details about his sex life. I think that was the main reason. It's just really hard. And I think it's traumatic for them to think about some of these things and to think about the fact that their dad cheated on them. I've gotten to know a lot of their friends and their cousins and nieces and nephews, and I think that they're convinced that King didn't cheat on Coretta. And they really believe it. So anything that approaches that subject is off limits for them, I think.
Wow. I was gonna ask about that. I wonder, like, I remember when that was coming up initially, like, did you think about how to wrestle with the reveal of personal life, right? Like Like, because in some ways I totally see this narrative quality, but it's also like less necessary, or could be seen as less necessary, right? So I'm just saying, how did you decide what felt illustrative versus what felt indulgent?
I think it's just a gut check, like in any story you write, any book you write, or any podcast you make, like how much of this goes in and how much doesn't, and you just have to trust your instincts. Like I knew that I didn't want to wallow in it. I didn't want that to be the point of the book, or for people to take away, wow, it's really salacious. But I also wanted to be honest and just come as close to the truth as I can. But I've also felt like I had to have his sex life in there because that's what the FBI used more than anything else to try to destroy him. So you got to put it in, and you got also to show like how sad and lonely he was. And that's why he's with these other women partly. So I just felt like...
Because you do want to know what it feels like to be Martin Luther King, if possible.
Yeah, right. If we can possibly imagine it, you got to know that he was lonely and he was sad. He was calling these women in the middle of the night saying, yeah, I miss you too. And that's just kind of sad, and it's also true. And we know it because the FBI was recording the calls, which is just like the craziest part of all, that like the people trying to destroy him actually gave us this intimate view into his life.
But like I read that you said that, I hope you don't mind me quoting you to you, but you said this thing that I found encouraging, which is you were like, every biography is kind of a failure because you can't know the full life, which I was like, I do feel like that as a reporter, that like it is an exercise in failure, like you're not gonna get to the
crazy talk.
deepest motivation of the person.
Crazy talk.
But like, if you're on the one subject and you feel like you're never gonna touch the sweet spot,
you're gonna try to get.
that
I think you can touch the sweet spot, but you're never gonna touch all the sweet spots. You're never gonna really know. Like, I couldn't write a book and really know my mom or my dad, right? Like, even if so, like people I know best. You disagree?
Wait.
All right, go.
I don't know. Like you have a whole like if you just think about like what we all do, which is so much smaller than writing a book about somebody.
Ira's a lot more positive than I am.
Yeah.
and like
Same job.
like you were going out in the world, you talk to people, you try to like be like, okay, here are the interesting things and the important things to understand about this person. And I feel like yes, it's not the complete person, but like the thought that like, and I feel like the kind of stuff that the three of us do is so fast. You know what I mean? Like we know it's incomplete, and that's fine. That's kind of built into it. That's part of the fun of it in a way. It's like I'm going out, like here it is.
Right, like picking your spot.
But like if you're saying that, like somebody who spends how many years on a book?
6.
6 years on a book to understand one person, and you're exhaustively talking to everybody who'll talk to you. You're looking through all the papers. You're saying even at the end of if at the end of that, if you can't understand and say here are the important parts of who they are, if that's hopeless, then what we're doing is so hopeless.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
Right
you
in the
can't
graph, we're so much farther from the center.
So you guys actually enjoy the Trump rallies? Or is it you just find that they're good stories?
7 out of 10 times it's like a SEC football game, and so it can be enjoyable, but nah, it's mostly like a show. And I was like, 3 out of 10 times it's like the craziest thing I've ever seen, right? Like, and I'm like not enjoying myself at all, you know? So I'm saying the range really matters, and it's like not clear.
Well, like an FCC football game is more fun if you're drunk.
Yeah, I'm saying like there's some parts of it that feel festival-y. I don't know how you feel, but like your head is too on a swivel to ever feel that comfortable.
Oh yeah.
Like-
And like, I mean, I usually at some point, like something uncomfortable happens.
Yeah, something's gonna happen.
Where people, you know, someone's gonna yell at you and call you fake news.
Oh, to you, something's gonna
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Something is gonna like go a little, and like then I'm gonna sort of have that feeling there of like people don't want me here, which like.
What are the things? You remember the things. What's happened?
Oh, well, I have like the regular like female reporter things. It's like a very male room, so like there's just like that where like you'll be doing an interview and someone will be like, "You married?" You know, and you're like, "Oh." But yeah, and then also people will say to me a lot like, "I can tell you're a liberal." Like I can tell you're a liberal. It's like the way you're asking the question, the way you're dressed, by your hair. Like people will say stuff to you like that, and then they're like, "What are you doing
Actually,
here?
your
Like
hair?
you're here
Actually,
to
your
get us." You know, and that for me, like.
What do you say?
I try to respond like kind of diplomatically, but like a lot of times I get cut off, and I get a little flustered by that. Like I say, usually what I say is like, my job is to ask questions. I'm genuinely curious. You don't have to answer anything. I'm just here to ask. But by that time, like, I feel like people are like suspicious of me that I'm like there to make fun of them, to like do something shady. And so like that feels bad.
The thing I feel like I often run into is like having authentic conversations. They will always say like, well, how can I be racist? We're talking right now.
Right.
That happens every single time. I've gotten like, go back to Africa's.
There are times when you really were like, let me explain how this, and you really just tried to how this could be possible.
No, I literally like, I have so, like, it's a one-way conversation. Like, they'll say it, I move on. Like, I don't acknowledge it. I don't chat it out.
You just wait till someone is listening to you, and then you stick with them, basically?
I basically think it doesn't matter. Like, I want to show that you're not the first Trump person I've talked to. I like know enough conservative news that you'll like think this is a real authentic conversation. They freak out about the New York Times. I say like, you know, if you think the Times won't represent or hear out people like you, here I am, like asking the question. So like, try me. What do you think I won't play? I promise you. I will, you know, so I like try to say
Does
something
that
like that.
ever reassure them?
Yeah.
What?
Does that ever work?
Often.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think we have a very good success rate of talking to conservatives.
It's an actual dare. You're like, try me. Try me.
I'm like, usually you can get away with that, but I'm actually I'm here and ask you the question and seriously interested in your answer. So, like, you know, that comes through. But to your point, even.
But what are you interested in right now, though? If like it's a lot of the same. That's what I've been curious about with the rallies. Like,
well, I would say we have tried to get away from rallies. We have tried. It's forced us to be more creative, but I don't think I'm getting a good. I don't think those are the best spaces for people right now.
But you're looking for spaces that are not Trump rallies.
But are
what are you
conservative.
looking
But have
for?
Trump
You're looking for
voters, I
conservatives.
imagine.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so I'm saying.
Because you don't want people who are so read into the script.
Yeah, because I actually think the more representative median voter is not at the Trump rally right now. Elections are fine. Like in New Hampshire, you can travel, you can knock door, you can find people. But at the rallies, I think it has become a hardened set there, and it feels like that.
do you guys ever like think about how much of our work is just trying to strategize how to get people to talk to you? Yeah. Like just like over the line of every email. Like
That's why I feel like emails should have their own separate Academy Award, and they should have their own separate Pulitzer.
Oh, I love
feel like I do
that.
some of my best writing in emails.
I love
Like,
that.
it's so
Give me an
much
example.
It's funny. Somebody reminded me this the other day. Like, there's a person who I met on a train, and she told me this story about getting bit by a shark when she was a teenager.
I was going to ask you about this. I have a memory about when you were trying to talk her into
When I was
the
trying to
story.
look into it, like, you know, when a story is really perfect, you remember it beat by beat, and you remember like every emotion the person has. Because what happens is like she gets bit by the shark, a doctor stitches her up, and he doesn't notice that like basically the shark's bitten through her bowel. She's going to be dead in 12 hours if they don't fix that. But he doesn't notice that. And then she goes back to the camper. She's like 13 years old. And or so, and she's just getting sicker and sicker, and her parents and the doctor told the parents, like, listen, she's gonna feel bad. She got totally cut up. It's totally normal. Like, if she has trouble sleeping, like, it's totally normal. And she's feeling worse and worse and worse. And what's happening is she's dying. Like, she'll be dead. Like, the stuff from her gut is leaking up all through her body. She's being poisoned from the inside, and sepsis and peritonitis, and she's gonna be dead. And she tries to convince her parents, and they don't believe her. They're just like, well, the doctor said you were going to feel bad. So the story has a lot of beats that were totally memorable. And then I was just like, do you ever want to talk to that and tell that story on the radio? And she's like, what do I get out of that? And nobody ever asked me that question. It's like, why would I do that? Right. What do I get out of that? And she said, like, look, I grew up in New Zealand, and I spent my whole life before I came to America as the girl who got bit by the shark. The very last thing I want is to now all these people I know in America for whom I'm passing as a normal adult, to know I had this dramatic thing, you know what I mean, that happened to me, and I don't want to be the girl who got bit by the shark for the rest of my life. Totally reasonable. She's like, what do I possibly get out of that? And I really had to think about, like, what does she get out of this to tell this story on the radio? And the only thing I came up with was, like, when people hear, like, this is so corny, and I don't know if she bought it, actually, but when people hear a story that they can connect to, it gives you a feeling. This is so corny, and now I've had 2 cocktails and I'm a little drunk. No, but I'm saying, like, it just gives you a feeling of, like, oh my God, like, that could be me. I see myself in you. Like, you just feel a sense of, like, corny human connection. And I said to her, this does nothing for you. You're giving a gift to all these people who are going to hear the story. That's it. That's all this is. So you can do that or not do that.
Wait, no, what I remember talking about when you were trying, you did say all that, but then as part of that pitch, and what I couldn't remember is which one it was. You were either said, and it makes the world feel bigger, or it makes the world feel smaller. And I don't know which one's better. But it was, do you remember which one you said?
I don't remember. I have to look back at that email. I mean, either way, it's saying the same feeling. It's saying, like, it makes us feel like we're like each other.
People wrote in after that story and were like, it made me feel like I fainted while driving my car.
Well, that was actually, like, it's the only thing we've ever broadcast where, like, actually people said, like, 3 people wrote to us and fainted during the story because it was so intense. We didn't understand that, like, I didn't realize that was a thing that could happen. Yeah.
And then the kicker was, in the fact-checking process, like a day before air, we discovered that it might not have been a shark, but like some kind of toothy seal. Do you remember this?
A seal.
Maybe I'm thinking of Arrested Development.
It wasn't.
We couldn't know it was a shark.
Like, we had to confirm that it was a shark, and so she had bite mark photos, and we showed them to an expert, and they're like, we can't totally confirm it. It wasn't a seal, it was like a mackerel or something. It was some other fish. It was some other
Like
fish.
it stinks.
Nobody faints over that.
No, it's a mackerel like this big. No, it totally.
I was bitten by a mackerel.
She
Not
almost
a
died.
fake.
Can I just say, like, she did almost
No,
die.
of course,
I'm
of
sorry.
course.
But the important thing is she actually went for your email when you said you get nothing out of this, it's a gift, and she went for it.
I don't necessarily think that's why she went for it. Like, I'd have to ask her. I'd have to ask her if that's why she said yes.
You get asked for money a lot for interviews?
Yeah.
All the time, right?
Yeah.
Wait, you do? All the time?
That seems normal. You're asking people to give you like an hour or two of
that's
their time,
understandable. It's
and
totally
like,
understandable.
like
But
that's like it doesn't serve them. It's all for
It
you.
seems normal to me, but I just didn't know something that everyone was being asked all the time for. I didn't know.
Not all the time, but often.
Do you explain why you don't?
Yeah, but usually if they're asking that, then they're really distant from journalism as a process, largely. So that's just a signal, like, I'll take you through, like, what we're gonna try to do here. But
What do you say when they ask, like, am I going to get paid?
no.
No, but what do you say for the reason? Like, what's the reason?
Well, I feel like we don't pay people.
Yeah, but that's not a reason. That's
Yeah.
not because we just
That's 'cause
don't.
I said
That's
so.
that's exactly.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
not
like-
satisfying. I've tried that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's not going to be the satisfying part of the answer. I feel like there's other reasons.
You can't
to do
explain
it.
like the ethics to them because their
No,
ethics.
I've tried the idealistic
I've
version
tried it
where I
too.
say, where you say, like, no, there's an idea that if I'm paying you, you just say anything I want because I'm paying you, so that's why we don't pay you.
But I think their ethical argument in response is actually stronger because what they say is, well, is your story going to be better with me in it? And are you going to sell more copies of the book if the book's better because I'm in it? So you're going to make more money if I'm in your book. Why shouldn't I get a slice of that?
Yep.
And what do you
win.
say? What do
I
you
said,
say?
You win.
What do you say?
I said, because I don't pay. Because I don't pay for interviews. They're like, no, there's no good answer.
Because like still, my experience has been like their feeling is like you're gonna have success, like you're gonna have monetary success, and it's because of what I'm
It's
doing
true.
for you.
But they're
And that's
right.
so true.
Yeah, they are
Like
right.
that's so
Right,
true that
yeah.
a lot of times I'm just like I'm so sorry. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't work that way, and like I'm just gonna ask you it, but you don't have to answer.
In the Muhammad Ali book, because it's boxing and because everybody got ripped off in the boxing world, they all wanted to be paid. Almost every single person I interviewed wanted to be paid, and it was really hard. I didn't pay anybody, but I kind of, I cut a few corners here and there, I suppose. But
Which means what? You took him out to dinner?
took
or
him out to
something?
dinner, or like I bought Ali's brother's paintings. Like he had a room full of paintings. You want to buy one of my paintings? Yeah, I bought one of his paintings.
I guess I've never been that persuaded by, like, I'm paying you so you're going to say something untrue or embellish something. I guess that's maybe what underlies the worry, partly.
No, it's
complicated.
really complicated, and we know it's transactional, and we know we're doing things to try to get people to talk to us, and sometimes telling them that the shark bite story is a gift to the world is enough, but oftentimes you also have to buy them dinner or buy a painting off of their wall. And it feels a little dirty. One of Ali's wives said to me, Khalila said to me, well, the last guy who interviewed me gave me $6,000, and that makes it harder.
I feel like it's hard when people think that there's going to be a change. like in the world. Like it's like, oh, I'm gonna get my cause out and this is good for my cause. And I'm like, I am so not here to do that. And I feel bad because I think that maybe they're coming into it with an expectation that like won't be met. And I try to be like clear because I'm like, I'm here to do a story that is like my goal is mostly, it's like it's providing an insight but also entertaining. Because I feel like sometimes we enter into the interview and they don't totally, they still think it's gonna be good for like their cause.
I mean, I think that I'm thinking about like one time I wrote this story about this guy in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and this group of people who were advocating for their town to change the rules to bring in no more like Somali immigrants.
No more refugee resettlement.
No more refugee resettlement. And I like hung out with this group that was like the leading group of like kick all the immigrants out of our town. And so I spent this 2 days with this guy as he would sit at Culver's every morning and basically draw up the plans and like send out all these kind of like Islamophobic propaganda and blah, 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 blah. He was saying really wild stuff. He was saying that, they don't deserve to be in this country. He was, it was stuff about how he was taking an active role and he was kind of a leading organizer. And in he brought me to their like weekly meeting where they talk about how much they hate immigrants and how they're gonna try to kick them out. And so I remember the day before it came out, I had talked to the mayor for another thing, but I called the mayor back and I was like, I think this is gonna be a thing, just for a heads up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I was just like, I don't want you to feel like, but I can tell from the openness of these people, like this is gonna hit hard. Mm-hmm. And so just warning. I do this story that he agrees to sit down for, that he has his picture of right in front of Culver's, runs on the front page, of course, massive blowback. Like he was really out open and honest about how he felt, whatever. And I got this letter from a family member actually after being like, do you consider what this does to us? Mm-hmm. Like, did you consider like what this impact would be on our family? And I remember saying and writing back like, it's not, like I understand that concern. I walked him through this process. He told me all this stuff and on record. And more importantly, like, I didn't characterize. I intentionally left it show, not tell, And I don't think that was a satisfying answer to her. And I thought about it for a little bit, but I don't think that's our role.
It's not your role to think about the blowback on that person's family.
Not always. I don't think, and I don't really think generally. I think I have to be more aware to tell you about the process because that blowback can be more intense these days. And so I think I'd take more of a proactive role in terms of calling people back, telling them what's gonna be in it. But standing in front of that blowback or writing in a way to make it not happen, I'm not sure that's my role.
Yeah.
Well, I have theories as to why sometimes folks misunderestimate it, but I don't. I try to make sure, from my perspective, I'm being proactive. And I'm trying to walk you through it, and I'm not trying to be overly, use the worst parts in stories. The times it's often pulling me back from you've already made the point, you don't need this quote too, And I think that's a good instinct to be like, not every version of the thing that they said has to be.
It's so interesting. I don't think all reporters agree that it's not our jobs to save people from themselves sometimes. Like, it's reminding me of an experience I had. An experience I had with S-Town. I interviewed this guy who's a white supremacist who said a bunch of white supremacist stuff, racial epithets. And we put some of them in the story. And I remember we sent that episode with a few others to a few like reviewers beforehand to listen. And some of the feedback we got from people at major publications was like, aren't you worried about the blowback that guy's gonna get for saying these things? Yeah. Does he understand he's on the radio or gonna be in a podcast? Like concern for him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having shared that stuff, exactly kind of what you're talking about. Anyway, the show came out. That guy's name was Bubba. Facebook messaged me. He's like, Brian, call me. I was like, okay, all right, here it is, Mm-hmm. And I call him, and He goes, I loved the fucking story. I listened to it twice. He was like, you captured my views perfectly.
Yeah.
Like,
I get that experience too. Like,
sometimes
we infantilize folks about their own views.
Yeah.
And I'm
no,
like,
he believes
he believes
things,
what he's saying. Like, it's not, it's an earnest belief.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not leading them into saying things that you know are going to be sensational.
Yeah.
As long as you're accurately portraying. But we've all been in that boat where people are saying stuff where they're going to get in trouble for it. Maybe they're going to get fired for it, and you're letting them go on, and you're going to put it on the air or put it in print, right? Like, it's going to cause some damage.
Well, it's telling that it's the family member who reached out to you and not him. Like, he stood by what he believed.
Yeah, as much as I know. I heard from him when the story came out. But in that same story, someone got fired because this woman said, it's not like they're coming. She was this like anti-immigration. She said, it's not like they're coming from Sweden. And that was the quote that like got her suspended and later from her organization. I wasn't trying to be there to get you to say the most crass version, but I do want you to say the most clear version. And so oftentimes I feel like in my experience, I think particularly because of blackness and a couple of other things, people will slight tread, and I have to not go there initially. I always let the first 5 versions of it go. I'm here for the clear one, And to your point, it's not like you're trying to like you're not itching for you to say like a slur, but I don't want sometimes I feel like I often get overly sanitized because they're having their like, I'm talking to a black person thing. And so I usually have to wait till I feel like, that lady didn't say that initially. She basically said it in the 3rd time of saying the same thing. And so I always, to the point about ignoring, I oftentimes ignore the first couple. So like, it's not a huge deal. I didn't freak out about the first time you mentioned race. I didn't freak out about the first time you talked about like immigrants or whatever. And I'll come back to it later. You'll probably get a little closer. But once she says the Sweden thing, I don't need to say, what do you mean? Like I know what you mean. Right. And so I'm like, okay, thank you. We can move on.
I remembered a really good story about that along these lines. When I was a brand new reporter, first job in New Orleans, I was assigned to the Gretna Bureau, and there was a public housing project in Gretna, the Fisher public housing project, and there were these 2 white cops that were assigned to patrol Fisher, and they'd been assigned to it for years, and they were being reassigned, and Fisher wasn't going to have its own dedicated police officers anymore. And the department gave me permission to ride with these guys for like the last week that they were actually on duty, and they decided to like show off for me, like how how connected they were, how badass they were, and they did all this really terrible stuff, like just really harassing people, really terrible. And they knew there was a reporter and a photographer in the backseat of their police car while they were doing all this, right? And they just were really showing off. I could tell you the stories about what they did, like. They arrested this one guy, a white guy who came in to buy drugs. This was like in the early days of the crack epidemic, right? This white guy comes in to buy drugs, and they arrest him with the drugs, and they drive him. And the guy says, "Oh, please, before you take my kids' Christmas presents are in the trunk. Would you please just like lock up the car before you take me in?" And they go, "Oh, sure, we'll lock up your car." And they go back and they say, "Oh, so your Christmas presents are all in the trunk? Okay, we're locking your car." And they drive him around the block and come back like in 2 minutes in the cars, completely. It's actually like up on cinder blocks in just like a couple minutes. It was just terrible, like the stuff they did, all with a reporter and a photographer in the backseat of the car. So the story ran like the next Sunday, and they both got suspended. And then the following week, one of the cops was at the zoo with his kids, and another kid like fell into the rhino pen, and this cop jumped in and rescued the kid from the rhino pen, and he got a medal and he got reinstated, and it was just beautiful.
The other cop threw that kid in the rhino pen.
That's the perfect ending to the story. Oh man, that was all true except for the part your part's better.
See, that's
perfect. Wow.
That is amazing.
Beautiful. And those guys were like my friends for the next few years. I couldn't get a ticket in Gretna. Like these guys, they still loved the story.
Yeah.
Even though they got suspended, they loved the story.
Oh, they did?
They loved it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I love
it was
that.
all true.
Yeah.
And it made them look like cowboys.
When I think about like where journalism is and where it fails, I feel like that's, which I'm only thinking about because I know you have a podcast to make about this kind of thing.
Which will solve the problem, right?
But wait, you really never think about it?
No, I do think about it, but like, I don't know, thinking about like, oh wait, we're gonna talk about journalism. I feel like, oh, everybody thinks about that more than I do. And like the big, whatever, like I don't know. But like when I think about like where things are failing, I feel like there's nobody attempting to give fact-based information to the people who are watching Fox News, to the people like, like I have relatives who are like Fox News watchers, and like, just to the people you meet in MAGA crowd, and the people who I met at the Glenn Beck rally years ago, like just like totally, just like people who are just believing stuff that's not true. I feel like nobody's trying to create a product. Nobody in mainstream media is trying to create a product that will pierce through to the people who don't believe mainstream media. And I think it's a really interesting project. And when you think about who could do it, it's like you would want a Daily Show that's hosted by a kind of right-wing-ish comedian, like a Bill Burr, or like, just like a whole like world of those like right-wing guys.
Joe Rogan.
But if Joe Rogan were a little more close to the facts, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what you want is somebody who's sort of funny, who you kind of feel like is talking straight in some way.
You think it's a personality, like, first question?
I think it's the only, like,
Tone,
I mean, as a
personality.
producer, when I think about it,
Yeah.
I think like that would be the easiest way to cut through, because you need somebody who defines categories so people don't see, you know what I mean? Like if you had a regular NPR person, a regular Times person, like you can just smell it on them. Like you need somebody who chemically feels right, and then you might have a chance. And I feel like what's happening is, in the war of facts versus non-facts, facts are losing, or they're not winning. Like they're losing ground. Like I just, like we don't talk, like I don't know, like how many hundreds of thousands of people died because they didn't believe factual information about the COVID vaccine. I mean, I feel like why aren't we always talking about that? Of just like, there's like a death count on this. You know what I mean? I don't know.
But isn't that mean?
I'm just going on. Like I'm feeling.
Doesn't that mean journalism's failing?
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, like, what do you think of how Ira's characterizing the problem, like in terms of people sort of not having access to facts?
In my experience, the massive step back from just fact-based conversation, some of that's been intentional. Like, I think the people around me who are in media who, they actually don't care if it's true or not anymore, or less.
Who doesn't care?
I'm saying, if I think about like my group chat from home, like there was a point 4 years ago where like I could be like, that's from a fake site, and that response will be heard because there was a desire for information. Now they're like, who cares? Stop bringing down the vibes. Like I just think there's a bigger step back from even the desire for fact and truth. And so like even making the case of this being misinformation is now, I think, something that doesn't have the same weight against it. Like, and partially because the institutions that were supposed to be the guardians of trust in media and whatever, I think a lot of people feel have blown that. And so...
That's interesting. You think there's not, one of my favorite lines of writing ever is in one of your stories, Zoe, about Minnesota, where you're talking about like the road show, the anti-Muslim immigrant roadshow.
That was
I think that came to St. Cloud.
I think you say in there something to the effect, these people have a desire for information, and this feels like information, even though it's actually propaganda.
Yeah.
I've always kind of held on to that is an underlying truth about people, that
people
do want to feel informed. There is a desire for information, but you're saying maybe that's changed?
I think it's an institutional trust deficit, and I think it is. Trump supporters are the clearest example. And to be honest, the left-wing part is overrated too.
Yeah, right.
Like, the amount that if we put non-conservatives are all in this agreement on what facts are, is not true either. And so, like, I think we focus on Trump supporters, but the thing that taught me about trust was not Trump supporters, was crime reporting in Boston neighborhoods where they actually had never shown up before that murder, before that fire, or like all of those things. And I feel like the lack of trust in those communities has been really real. And I think it's experiencing, and it's part of this too, right? Like when my New York Times skepticism does not only come from conservatives. Like increasingly now.
Ira, how do you feel about the change, how things have changed since you started?
I mean, journalism and what?
Yeah. You started at NPR in like an idealistic time where it was this new thing, trying to do something new. You then started something new in a very idealistic sense. And, you know.
I don't know if my answer to this is so interesting. Like I came into journalism feeling like, oh, if you sort of lay out a case with information that's true, like you could persuade people and that would change something. And I feel like what I've seen is that's not true. Like, it's just like, I just want to believe that people can understand each other. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that if you make stories for a living, like I don't know, like part of the reason why you do it is because it's really interesting to go out in the world and talk to people, and it just makes everything seem bigger, to like discover stuff that you didn't know and connect to people that way.
Either way.
Yeah.
Or smaller, exactly, depending on how you see it. But they mean the same thing. But you know what I mean? Like part of it is that, and it's like, it's just interesting to be out in the world and like, and then like to try to say like, here's what it seems to be. Like that act is kind of enjoyable.
But wait, do you
Even
think
when we
there's
talk
something
to-
to Ira's idea or not?
I think it runs up against the same barriers. I don't think the problem is that we're not making it. Or maybe some people
But it's
feel
the
like
delivery.
that. I feel like
I think you're talking about the delivery,
No.
right, Ira? And the
I feel like
connection?
every day there's incredible reporting, giving fact-based, giving fact-based accounts of how to see the world. The problem isn't that doesn't exist. The problem is that like half the population has no interest in that at all, maybe more, and we live in this country that's so divided. And like, what can you possibly do? And then that's why I think about like, what could the product be? Yep. That's the way I think about a problem. It's like how would I do it as a radio producer? And I feel like that's the one tiny like opening that I see is like you just need somebody with enough charisma that they would carry people over the line, and it wouldn't be a traditional journalist.
To me, this is smaller. I have trouble like what you do, Ira, where you think about like, what can we do? Because there's like a problem. How could we fix it? I'm so focused on thinking about the ways that like we've screwed up, or that like the reasons that people don't trust, rather than like, is there a way back from it?
Which means what for you? What do
Like
you
one
list?
example would be like COVID. Like I get really stuck on like how completely like just fucked the response was. You know, that like schools were closed and kids were taken out of schools, and like people just felt not listened to, and there wasn't the right evidence to do that. And there was such a like break, like because people did that. They like kept their kids out of school, and now they're so mad. And like I get kind of like caught up in just like, you know, like frustration with that, where I'm like, the trust was already so thin. Mm-hmm. And then we had this COVID experience, and there was no kind of like massive, I don't know what it would be, but like reckoning. Or
Let's take an issue that's not political, like cell phones. This new book, Anxiety Nation, I think it's called. I think people have really been discussing that, and I think it's been really informing people. And will it change the world? I don't know. Like Julie Jargon at the Wall Street Journal had a story last week about a teacher who quit his job at the age of 35 because he couldn't get his kids to put down their cell phones, and it just drove him to the point where he lost his passion for his work anymore. And this is a teacher who, it was just like a 1,000-word article. This is the best, you know, kind of daily newspaper that I love, because she probably wrote this story in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And this is a teacher who really tried. You know, he took his kids on hikes, and he offered them incentives on their grades if they put down their phones, and he taught them about meditation, and he gave it his best shot, and he lost to the cell phone. And he said it was like they were addicted to the bottle. They just couldn't, if he tried to take it out of their hands, they wouldn't let go of it. And that kind of story, I think, you know, gives me, you know, is the kind of thing that I think that we write because those kinds of stories, we write those stories because and I'm sure Julie Jargon wrote that story because she thought it's one little blow that she can strike, just like this book is striking a bigger blow against something I think we all agree is a problem, like our phone addictions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and maybe this is a consequence of political reporting only in post-Trump, but I think that, for me, changing minds has never been a big priority. And so I think about what has then motivated the work. And for me, it's been like, I want an honest accounting of this time. Like, I want to go to the places and the people. I remember the night of the 2016 election thinking, you know, as a local reporter covering crime at the Globe, like I felt like as a ingester of that election, I was not prepared to understand the country in that way. And I remember that being the thing that most upset me about media. It wasn't like my anger wasn't like a specific side or whatever, but I'm saying as a journalist, I felt like the people following that election or writing about that election or tasked with helping me understand the state of America via that election. That in the Democratic primary, the Republican primary, and the general election did not prepare me to do that. So I feel like that feeling has bottled up in me as like a try to make sense of it for other people so that they don't feel like that. But it's not as if
Just
that means
actually reflect reality.
Yeah, just actually let people know what is around them and what this is about and why. And I think that requires some accountability or whatever, but that's not mind changing. And so I don't feel like I'm failing if I don't change minds.
But like, I'm surprised, like, were you that surprised in 2016?
It wasn't my job, to be honest. I only knew via what I was reading in political journalism. But if I was reading the things in front of me and trusting the people who I had trusted to talk through elections, they had let me down for a year and a half, you know? And so that feeling was really clear to me. And so I remember when the Globe, the Globe didn't have a plan, and I think I said this, but like a lot of people didn't, for Trump to win. And so I ended up getting moved that next morning as like the young 22, 3-year-old who like had no life and kids to like, oh, do you want to go in DC and help us out for a while? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I feel really weird about journalism right now. I like said this like really millennial answer about like, I don't know if like I want to be. And I remember the Globe editor saying like, you have complained too much about how people do this to not try to do it. And I really held on to that as like okay, maybe that's my goal for the next time, is not to change minds or impact in a traditional journalism way, but just stop more people from having the same feeling I felt, which is like, how was I not prepared for this?
I feel you talking about like journalism's role being to reflect reality or just kind of document that's the best we can do. I believe that for a long time, and I've been in this zone of just feeling like it doesn't feel like enough. And that's kind of the spirit of this. It's just like there's something like that felt like enough for so long, and like that was our role and our purpose, and there's something about it.
But honestly, like it's so hard to just do that. Like even like
That's what I
capturing
was
what the
just
moment
thinking.
is. Like even doing that well is just like, so hard. When you said that, I was like, the thing it made me think of is years ago I had this conversation with this guy named John Madison, who was the lead political reporter at the Rand Daily Mail when Nelson Mandela was still in prison, and Steve Biko, and the whole like apartheid movement when it seemed hopeless. And the Rand Daily Mail was one free newspaper, like the one like uncensored newspaper in South Africa, and even they would get like fucked with by the government now and then. And he said that it was a little bit like working in a bunker where you were under siege, right? And they felt like, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna like just document what's really happening. And he said the mentality in the newsroom and the thing that they said to each other was kind of, we might get shut down, this may go nowhere, but someday, when people look back on this moment, we want to have captured it accurately so nobody can say this didn't happen.
Yeah, 100%. That's how I feel.
I know, but that's such it's funny because when John said it, I thought like it's such a defensive position. It's sort of like all is lost. We're barely holding on by our fingernails. And so the one thing that's left is let's just like, please just like write this down.
Make a record of it.
Make a record of it.
Yeah.
Like let's like, I just want the truth to exist. It's like simultaneously so purely idealistic, but it's also like a bunch of like monks in the last monastery, like who know how to write, being surrounded by like people who are about to like destroy them or something. Like I don't know. Like there's something about this.
No, I feel you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's defeatist or idealistic. I think it's a little bit of both. but I also believe in journalism enough. I didn't go work for a political organization or a candidate or whatever like that. And so I definitely think it's not fully defeatist.
I'm Brian Reed. This is Question Everything. Thanks for listening.